Okay guys, I'm going to pull a card. Excuse me. One card this time. Because I want to start off this series. I want to get a series up about meditation and what it does for me and why I use the particular styles of meditation that I use. And for that I will also have to go into a bit more of my personal, well-known by now, personal history and some of my reactions to things. I have this morning been in contact with a couple of people directly or indirectly, where once again I am confronted with the fact that I simply I have a very strong tendency to overreact to everything. It's a human phenomenon, it happens, and it happens to me quite a lot. And I don't have any middle ground. Well, that's what it feels like anyway. I react very strongly, very emotionally. I feel anger, abandonment, guilt, and fear. And on the other side, I feel very sure that what I am doing is the right thing. I don't want to be submerged in the needs of the team, for example. That's a big issue with me. I always want to be doing my thing and I want to contribute. I want to be a part of it, but I don't want to be submerged. And there's a lot there that I need to still work on, explore, and the mere idea of trying for middle ground is rather strange to me. But for now, I will just go into the way things have been and how from there I have developed certain strategies to cope, and they're very, very useful, very helpful strategies. I have quite a lot to share about that. So let's see what card comes up, okay? I shuffled. This is my trusted Marielle, well known to many of you. And the card that comes out is the Ten of Cups. And this is what it looks like in the Marielle. Oh my goddess, as somebody else used to say, still says regularly. I'm referring to Kellyanne Maddox, of course. The Ten of Cups, okay? And it looks like, let me look at this. Yes, both are actually, they're on a horse. A red fiery Baba Yaga type horse, I think. And it's that, isn't it? I have a painting that I made. Please stick around for 1 second. I'm going to try and find it because it might be right here. I wasn't going to go into this, but then again, here we are, and now I have to. There it is. Oh, Puss, will you please shut up because I'm recording a video here. I'm not talking to you. It always goes like this. This I made at a stage when I had been doing oil painting for a couple of years. I enjoyed doing it very much. And all of a sudden, I had to do skeletons. This was the first one I made. This one right here. The Death as King, or some such title, painting that I made. They're fairly small. This is like 20 centimeters or so. So you can see 20 by 25-ish, 26, 7. And I liked doing skeletons suddenly a lot, and I found it really very useful to, typical word that I use the whole time, to do, for anatomical learning, how to figure out how to put a figure in the proper position, get the balance right and all that. But this one is rather a lot more emotional than the other one, and there's also tons of emotional reasons for me to draw and paint skeletons, and it was quite a significant phase at that time. I find it rather striking that when I look at this card, I hope you can see that, because there's like a skeletal figure with a tiny skeletal child in its arms right there on the top. So I'll have to check whether you can actually see that. Otherwise you will just have to look it up, people. Somehow this is an idea or an emotion that has been with me, and I think it's very fitting for the Ten of Cups. It is like the end of the road, isn't it? It is like you can go, there is no further, there's no horizon, there is nothing beyond. It is what happens when people are traumatized. I can draw no other conclusion than that both of these images, and actually my search for, drawing bones and skeletons and skulls was a representation or an attempt on my behalf to figure this out for myself. That I figured, that I kind of felt that I was at the end of my line, of my tether, really. And I had been at the end of my tether all my life. And a part of that is that the way I was brought up, and I've gone into that a bit, rather a bit. I've explained quite a lot of details about how things went, how we moved house the whole time. Something I may not have been quite so explicit about is the fact that my mother suffered a mysterious illness that caused her a great deal of belly pain and intestinal and hormonal and all that. And she also suffered from migraines. I think with hindsight now that there was a lot of anger in her. Obviously, I've said that. And she didn't have the tools to work it out in any way. She was more alone than I was. But I grew up with this woman, okay? We were together from, like I explained in an earlier video, from my 8th year. So from then onwards we have been together until I was 28, and then she passed away. It was in 1995. And she determined a great amount of what I could feel, what I could think. She allowed it or she did not allow it. And that was that. And I did not have another example in my life because of the way things went. I moved from one place to another constantly. So I say constantly, it wasn't like we up sticks every month, but we have moved in those, like when I met my husband, I was 21. So I moved in with him, okay? So for the latter 7 years of my life in that period, I was with him most of the time, and I tried to look after my mother when she needed me, but there was rather a conflict because she was used to having me at her disposal. She could use me in any way she wanted, really. And she had, it depended on how she felt, right? Because if she was in a bad way, she would be close to being a borderline type personality. She'd be very self-involved. She wouldn't be able to listen to what I had to say or to my side of the story in any way or means. And so I have felt abandoned and like forgotten, or like there was no interest from her in me. Like I was her child, but I was only like a servant or a pawn. And I had to, but she was always very worried about me. It was just her way, you know. She was like that, and she had been traumatized herself. So there was a large part of that that I understood already, but I had not had any training, or I hadn't been allowed to grow in other ways than the way that was hers, right? And the word that comes to mind each time that I think about this, and the way we were, the way my mother behaved towards me, the way she treated me, is ruthless. And I looked up the word ruthless because I didn't come up straight away with the Dutch translation for the word. And this is pretty ruthless, right? All this kind of stuff. Well, that's why this is the Ten of Cups. Yeah, totally. I can sort of see that. So let's go into that, okay? If you translate ruthless into Dutch, you get a series of options. And there's, on the website that I visited, there was also a couple of alternative terms, like in English, okay? So where they give ruthless, you can also say pitiless or merciless or some such word. However, if you translate ruthless, the emotional meaning, the actual way we use the word into Dutch, you get a word that has the meaning of having no compassion. And I am really surprised at how puritanical the Dutch language is. I find it fascinating to see, because the English are much politer normally. I mean, culturally, okay? I'm not going into the whole, of course there's groups of people who misbehave, but you have plenty of those in Holland as well. And we have certain advantages in Holland as to, you know, people having access to a certain amount of personal sovereignty, which I think is brilliant, which is the reason I live in this country and why I like to live here still, even though it's highly overpopulated and there's way too many of us. But it's an attractive country for that, because people can be free, okay? We can be free to do our own thing. But the other side of the freedom is the sense of responsibility, and there's a great historical imperative to be to be puritanical and to be upright and upstanding, and to, not necessarily conform to rules or anything, but to have a consciousness that you are responsible on your own in the face of God. There you go. That's more or less the sense of puritanical responsibility that people have been given. And not everybody is the same, of course, and there's degrees in this. But in the language, in the actual language, there's heaps and heaps and treasures. Actually, I think it's pretty much a treasure of emotion buried, that you can see that the Dutch words, there are several, and they're all way more like, you know, stern and authoritarian and tough words to use. In English, you couldn't use the word. If I say to you ruthless, you go like, ooh, that's nasty. Yes, it is. But if I say meedogenloos, which is an excessive way of pronouncing that, it means without compassion. Mededogen is compassion. Be with, suffer with the other guy. Okay, that's what that means. And meedogenloos is a terrible word. It's like like a knife, you know. There's no the only thing that comes remotely close to this is relentless, which was at the bottom of the list. And relentless to me means without cease. Okay, so it just goes on and on and on forever, relentlessly banging your head against the wall, right? Okay, so that in a nutshell right there, banging your head against the wall, that was both my parents, my mother, and me. It turns out I'm way more like that than I like. I don't like any of this. I like to be, friends with everybody and just have a good time and be outside and, be on holiday like 90% of the time. That's my lifestyle. Ideally, at least that's what I think of myself. That's the way I think. But then the moment I am challenged, the moment I am put under pressure, the moment I am supposed to be part of a team, and think of things that I don't normally naturally think of, I will feel challenged. I will feel attacked. I will feel and all the everything, all the good intentions even will just go down the drain, and there's no hope, no hope for tomorrow. So all that is pretty much in this card for me, and it looks like we're still going somewhere, and there's still a horse, and we're still on our way to somewhere, but it's rather dramatic. And okay, that brings me then to my it's a lengthy introduction, sorry. It brings me to the meditation practices that I have been using, because I needed ways to counteract, to act against my own very impulsive tendencies. And I have, I'm like made of fire, okay? I explode, I burn up, emotions go completely out of control. There is no boundary to what I feel, especially negative feelings. Positive feelings, sometimes, yeah, but it happens. But the negative feelings, the guilt, the sense of guilt that I have been instilled with, I hope I'm not passing that on to you by doing this. Don't, let's not, okay, let it stop here. I don't suffer from it in like, no, it's not 10%, from what it used to be like. It's less than 10%. And it doesn't, just tear me along the way it used to. It doesn't take control of my consciousness all the way. It doesn't do that anymore. But it used to be quite bad. It used to be dissociative. I just used to fragment in bits and shards, and I was continually exhausted and continually in a state of not knowing what to do about anything, really. It was utter helplessness. I had no way of dealing with any of this. I had moments where I would feel depressed. I would feel extremely sorry for myself. I would feel, typically I would kind of emotionally shut down completely, and I would not be able to feel nature around me, which was the first types of signals that there was something really wrong in my life, were those where I would walk by a flowering chestnut tree, for example, in the summertime by the end of May or what have you, and it was just glorious, and it was full of light. The tree is full of light and life, and everything is just glorious. There, such pretty little blossoms, and they're all grouped together like that. And the normal thing for me is to go, hallelujah, will you look at that? It's just glorious, it's fabulous. So yes, plenty positive emotions as well. But that's the normal situation at that point in my life, and this is like 30 odd years ago. I would just stand there and it would just be completely blank. It would not register. I could see it, and I could tell deep inside that I was wanting to move towards the light and towards the life and the love that I could feel. And I just was completely incapable of any movement. I was completely bogged down. It was like I was held in cement or something. I was just frozen. And I thought, this isn't good. This isn't me. This is not normal for me, okay? But I couldn't really feel anything else. It wasn't like I was at that point or in that moment feeling bad or desperate, or I was just numb, completely numbed out and flatlining emotionally. And that was the start, I think, of a very, very long process. When this happened to me, I was like 22, 23 years old. And I had been living with my husband for a year and some, you know. I was happy with him. I felt a bit more free. I felt a bit more carefree sometimes. But my mother was living close by, and I still had to do a lot to look after her and to take care of her and stuff. So from then onwards, I've had to develop all sorts of, you know, processes and tried, and I have also had to simply wait a long time for the right notions and the right developments and the right things to take place. And it has had to be the way it has been, apparently, because the ideas that I have now and the processes and the thought and emotion processes that I work with nowadays, I didn't have back then. I didn't have the meditation processes either. I didn't have the techniques or any of it. So everything was just very slow and very heavy all the time. And I was fighting my way out of that. And it has taken me all those years. So really 30 years worth that I'm presenting to you here in, what is it, 21 minutes worth. So I think it's only fair to, you know, go into this kind of thing and to show you from here on out what it is that I have been doing, other than the things I've already shown you about the completion process and about the soul retrieval. Those are personal stories to me, okay, but they're fairly recent. They have, those things have that I've gone into those parts of those ways of working really in the past 4 years, and before that the whole thing was made of concrete, right? It was just, I was a lump, and I had a really hard time breaking my way out of the lump. So I think I will just tie a knot in this right here. So it'll be a personal introduction to the theme, and from here on I will start describing what it is that I do, and how to, you know, how maybe you can use some of that at some point. So see you in a bit.